right, let's look at some teams that are in win now mode. We talked about the ones that just barely missed out on making the college football playoff, but there's still plenty of other teams that I wouldn't say one guy away because that's not how this transfer portal thing works. It's usually multiple guys, but some that should capitalize on success that they had last season. But who's a team that maybe is just a couple of players away if they get it right this year?
The team that we've been talking about in Cover 3 for a while that basically has to have chips to the middle of the table here for the 2025 season is Auburn. Auburn has been spending tremendously at the high school level for the past 2 years. They tried to basically do a more of a traditional approach with build up the high school, build up that kind of in-house talent base first for a minute, and then figure out what you have and supplement that in year 3. Auburn notably didn't take any kind of expensive quarterback in the portal this offseason. They missed a bowl, so maybe perhaps they should have actually done that, but they didn't. And I think if you look at Auburn, that's a team that does have a lot of nice young pieces to build around. Auburn should be spending like crazy this year because it's a lot cheaper to spend than it is to pay that Hugh Freeze buyout. And if they have another bad year, I assume the Auburn boosters will want to hire or to fire Hugh Freeze. So Auburn has been the team that I've had circled for really basically ever since last year's portal ended. I was like, okay, they're keeping their powder dry. They're not spending like crazy in the portal for the 2024 season, but it's Auburn. They're sitting on a pile of cash. It's got to be coming for 25.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a calculated shot by, I think, Hugh Freeze. I think they thought, obviously, the on-field performance was going to be a whole lot better than 5-7 this year. But you look at what Auburn's done in the recruiting trail, and this is why I like to be able to tie it into signing day that we had last Monday. I mean, you think about Auburn coming off the heels of 2 top 10 classes. So the cavalry is coming. It kind of feels a little like Florida. The thing that Auburn doesn't have, they don't have DJ Lagway, right? And they have a young quarterback room. Think about the 2 guys that they have right now, Walker White, Deuce Knight. That is not going to be the signal caller in 2025. There is no way Hugh Freeze can do that. So we talked a little bit about Caden Salter, obviously a guy that's been connected to that program with Hugh Freeze, his connections from Liberty. I want to know if Auburn's going to go big game hunting here and then what this portal market at the quarterback position is going to look like. They need to win. A couple other teams, USC, what do they do? I think about Brian Kelly going into next year in 2025. They had a little bit of a rough signing day. You lose Bryce Underwood. I think getting Garrett Nussmeier back would be huge for another year to kind of let them, mend the fences a little bit. But, LSU, Oklahoma, the other one I kind of look at is, all right, Penn State, if you have one more year of Drew Aller, you got to get him some weapons at the receiver position. And then Michigan, the clock is starting already. So what I mean by that is if you're going to pay Bryce Underwood all this money, which by all means they're paying a hefty lot, that's your window. Yeah. You got 3 years, right? So you got to make it count.
Starts for his freshman season?
Absolutely, 110%. And you go all in, especially in an expanded college football playoff format. You got to look at it that way, but in terms of, hey, I got a quarterback that we're building around here. I got a 3-year window to try to win a national championship or 2.
What do you think about Michigan, Bud?
Completely agree. I think it's interesting because I totally agree. If you're going to pay the guy, reportedly $12 million over 3 or whatever the actual number is, we know it's a pretty good chunk. Do you bring in a bridge quarterback, maybe like a Miller Moss type? I think obviously you're going to have to consult with Underwood some, but if you're paying him the money, the money, that's kind of what the money's for, as Don Draper would say. But I think maybe you bring in somebody to at least establish a floor for the quarterback room that you lack this year, with the hope that Underwood arrives maybe a year early at a certain level and is able to beat out a guy like Miller Moss, who he's like a fine player, but he's not scary. He's not like a major NFL prospect at this point in his career, so he shouldn't really be threatening. And I think if you bring in Miller Moss, it probably would be a real competition during fall camp, maybe with the expectation like a Mertz Lagway type situation, that maybe Lagway beats out Mertz later in the season. Ultimately, he started and played well, but that's because Mertz got hurt. Maybe Underwood is able to beat out a Miller Moss type of player later in this season. I think Michigan definitely fits that. I totally agree with LSU, assuming Nussmeier doesn't go pro, which if I'm Nussmeier, given who they're losing on the offensive line and who they could lose, and given what this quarterback class looks like for this draft, I'm going pro. I'm not waiting around to face the guys from next year.
What do you think?
I think he's in an interesting spot because I agree with Bud. I think NFL evaluators want to love Garrett Nussmeier, and I think in their hearts they're saying go back to school, but at the same time, they're going to be the first organization to say once it goes from day 1 to day 2 of the NFL draft, all right, somebody's going to run up there and grab Garrett Nussmeier because there's a lot to work with. Garrett Nussmeier needs to come back to school. I think this is a guy that loves LSU. But to Bud's point, Will Campbell's gone. Emory Jones probably gone. You think about LSU, we're going to talk about them in a second. What does that offensive line look like? You lose C.J. Daniels in the portal, Kyron Lacey as well. There are a lot of different pieces. Is Joe Sloan back next year, right? So we'll see what happens with LSU. I think there's a good argument for either side for him to go and for him to stay. I think he ultimately stays at the end of the day.
What about transfer as an option? Because I think if I'm Nussmeier, I'm not staying at LSU unless they bring in a lot of studs around me. Because that offense is getting rocked via NFL graduation. If I'm playing another year of college, I'm going somewhere that's more set up for me to win. Personally.
It's so interesting what you guys consider win now mode. I just think that that's a term that maybe needs a little bit of explaining, I guess. So when it comes to LSU, you mentioned some of the pieces that they have to work with, but I'm hearing lots of things that they need to accomplish in this portal season. But why do you consider LSU maybe a win now team based on what they have, or maybe perception could be a part of it, head coach could be a part of it?
Well, I thought they should have been win now this year, and we gave LSU we gave some hell for this on Cover 3, because I'm like, think about who you're going to lose after this year, right? Don't you lose 2 interior players as well? You lose two of the better tackles in the SEC. You lose a couple of receivers. If you think Nussmeier is the goods, and he played pretty well for you this year, you kind of need to be all in the portal. And LSU really botched the portal because they went super cheap this year. They thought they were going to save that money for high school, and they ended up losing Underwood. They ended up losing a number of other key players who were once committed to that class. Now it feels like you're not throwing good money after bad, but it feels like they missed their window. Good luck filling all these holes if you're LSU. Maybe they can, but Nussmeier's got to play incredibly well for this to be a win now mode. Now, granted, for Brian Kelly, it probably is win now. Otherwise, I know he's got a huge buyout, but LSU fans won't be super happy if they have another year like this season, especially when you fail to make the playoffs in a year in which Bama, it doesn't even make it, but Bama still smashes you in Baton Rouge. I just think they really botched this thing this year. They should have been all in. This is a team that, if you had the right pieces through the portal for the 2024 season, would easily have made the playoff, in my opinion.
Come on, bud. We're all about looking forward, looking ahead. How do we fix it now? That's why we bring you guys in here to help do some of the work of these general managers with programs